burning of Mayan codices. In one bonfire, 5,000 Mayan books were heaped up and burnt by some idiot priest.
Imagine this. Ancient Maya scribes hunched over bark paper, brushing mineral pigments into symbols they believed could outlast empires. Now, centuries later, glowing quantum processors hum as AI neural networks decode those same symbols. But here's the question. Are we really reading their message, or rewriting it? After half a millennium of silence, AI has cracked nearly 85% of Mayan hieroglyphs. The rest, the last 15%, is where the real danger hides. What if this final gap holds the same mistranslation that doomed civilizations before? Declassified government files and new academic research suggest exactly that. But before we understand what AI found, we need to know what was almost lost forever. How close did we come to erasing humanity's oldest digital code? The books that survived hell. Only 4 out of thousands of Maya books that once glowed with cosmic calendars, star maps, and sacred codes, only 4 made it out alive.
The Maya did make the most elaborate calendar system in the ancient world. They used typically 5 different cycles.
Every other one gone in a single inferno that turned knowledge into ash. It happened on July 12, 1562, in a small town called Mani on the Yucatan Peninsula. Spanish friar Diego de Landa stood before a mountain of Maya books. Bark paper codices painted with hieroglyphs so advanced they tracked Venus across a century and ordered them burnt. The friars called it an auto da fe, an act of faith. But what happened that day wasn't faith. It was cultural genocide. 27 codices, along with more than 5,000 carved idols and ceremonial artifacts, went up in flames. Landa wrote that the Maya contained superstitions and falsehoods of the devil. In that one bonfire, a civilization's memory was erased, but a few ghosts survived the fire. The first is the Dresden Codex. It sits today in Germany, water-stained and fragile, a survivor twice over, once from the Spanish conquest, and again from Allied bombs in World War II. Picture it, 78 pages of bark paper, folded accordion style, stretching nearly 4 meters long. The glyphs show intricate Venus tables that chart the planet's cycles over 104 years, eclipses, rituals, and agricultural dates. It's like NASA data, hand-painted with brushes made from animal hair, 600 years before rockets existed. Then there's the Madrid Codex in Spain, the Paris Codex in France, and the Grolier Codex, recently renamed the Maya Codex of Mexico. That last one was the underdog. For decades, scholars thought it was fake, too crude, too simple. But in 2016, carbon dating proved it was real. Written around 1230 CE, older than Columbus, older than the conquest, older than most medieval European manuscripts. These 4 texts are the only surviving Mayan voices from a library that once stretched across an empire. Think about that. Thousands of books, gone. 4 remain. And we're still piecing together what they were trying to tell us. And here's where irony takes a cruel twist. The same man who burnt those books, Diego de Landa, later wrote his own. Relación de las cosas de Yucatán, or Account of the Things of Yucatan. It was part confession, part PR move, written to defend himself after the Spanish crown accused him of excessive cruelty. Yet that book, written by the destroyer himself, became the foundation of nearly everything we know about Maya civilization. In trying to rewrite their truth, he accidentally preserved fragments of it. So, when AI today scans the Dresden Codex, pixel by pixel, symbol by symbol, and reconstructs its grammar after 5 centuries of silence, it's not just decoding a dead language. It's resurrecting a memory that survived fire, conquest, and flood. These aren't just ancient books. They're survivors of hell, whispering through burnt edges and water stains. But here's the real question. These fragile pages have already survived fire, war, and time itself. Can they survive artificial intelligence? When the government got interested, the NSA's secret, Maya research. Here's where things get weird. In 1977, buried deep inside a classified technical journal, the U.S. National Security Agency quietly labeled the surviving Maya codices as visual astronomical computers. That's right, computers, not sacred texts, not primitive art. Actual analog computation systems written on bark paper, centuries before Alan Turing or Steve Jobs were even ideas in the universe. According to the Declassified report, only released in September 2021, the NSA didn't see the Dresden Codex as a religious calendar. They saw code, a programmable sequence of symbols capable of running astronomical calculations so precise they bordered on modern machine logic. The report described the codex as a non-digital, analog visual computing system capable of executing complex operations using pattern repetition and recursive logic. In other words, the Maya weren't just priests. They were coders painting software in pigment. And this is where the government's obsession kicked in. The NSA analysts working on early cryptography in the 70s realized that Mayan writing shared something eerily familiar: pattern recognition. The same principles that power encryption keys and early computer vision systems were hidden in hieroglyphs carved more than 1,000 years ago. One NSA researcher even noted that the Tzolk'in, the 260-day sacred calendar, functioned like a biological computer, syncing time not by machines, but by life cycles. Birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. Each symbol a data point, each phase part of a massive organic algorithm. You can almost hear the Cold War logic at play. If an ancient civilization cracked predictive astronomy without electronics, what could the US learn about non-digital computation? For decades, this data sat buried, labeled classified, astronomical, and cryptographic systems. What's wild is how good the Maya actually were at it. The NSA confirmed that their records of the Venus synodic cycle, 584 days, matched modern data almost perfectly. Modern astronomers put it at 583.92. Without telescopes, satellites, or computers, they were off by less than 1/10 of a day. Let that sink in. And then there's their eclipse prediction rate. The report shows they achieved roughly 55% accuracy across recorded cycles. And they did it with nothing but naked eye observation and symbolic math. That's higher than Europe's predictive accuracy during the Middle Ages. And some of those charts came from the same pages Diego de Landa didn't burn. So why did the NSA care? Because analog visual computing like this breaks every modern rule. It's pattern-based, non-linear, and resistant to digital corruption. For cryptographers, it was like finding a lost operating system, something that ran not on silicon chips, but on the rhythm of the cosmos. Imagine equations written in light, shadow, and memory instead of code. The timing of its declassification, 2021, couldn't have been more symbolic. Just as AI language models started teaching themselves logic and syntax, the government unsealed documents about an ancient people who did the same thing without machines. And here's the kicker. The NSA concluded that the Maya used visual recursion, the same mathematical process that modern AI uses to teach itself to think. If the 70s cryptographers saw the codices as early software, what happens when 21st century artificial intelligence reads them? What new instructions might it find hidden in those pages? The AI translation breakthrough. It finally happened. After 70 years of painstaking decipherment, the machines took over, and for a moment, it felt like the Maya were speaking again. Between 2024 and 2025, multiple AI systems, from Google's translation models to Claude AI, were trained to read the untranslatable, and incredibly, they did. Neural networks, fine-tuned foundation models, and convolutional neural networks, all fused together with optical character recognition and natural language processing, began decoding thousands of Mayan glyphs that humans had struggled with for generations. The results? Staggering. 80 to 85% of the hieroglyphic system is finally readable. But here's the catch. The missing 15 to 20% is the part that actually matters. This wasn't just some lab experiment. At West Virginia University, a collaboration between AI researchers and Maya art historians built a model that combined decades of archaeological imagery with deep learning pattern recognition. The AI began spotting connections scholars had only dreamed of. Glyphs, once thought to be random decorations, revealed consistent mathematical patterns, even matching phrases between codices separated by centuries. Some experts called it the biggest translation leap since the Rosetta Stone. The foundation for all this came from one man, Yuri Knorozov. Back in the 1950s, this Ukrainian linguist defied Cold War isolation to prove the unthinkable, that Maya glyphs weren't just pretty pictures. They were syllabic and phonetic, a full written language. For decades, scholars built on his work by hand, one symbol at a time. Now, AI could process 7 decades of human research in hours. It mapped over 800 unique glyphs, filled in missing fragments, and even suggested plausible translations for symbols long thought lost to erosion. But then, the problem appeared, the one no algorithm could solve. The Maya didn't think or write like we do. Every glyph is semantically dense, meaning it doesn't just say one thing. A single symbol can mean a sound, a word, a concept, a deity, and an emotion, all at once. Context changes everything. The same glyph could represent morning star, war, or rebirth, depending on its position, the phase of Venus, and the ritual calendar date it appears beside. Imagine trying to translate Shakespeare into binary code. It works technically, but you lose the soul. And that's the issue. These AI systems were trained on Western language patterns, English, Spanish, and Mandarin, languages that flow linearly, with clear beginnings and ends. The Maya didn't see time or meaning that way. Their system was cyclical, recursive, and built on loops of meaning that folded into themselves like code running on cosmic logic. The algorithms forced those nonlinear meanings into neat digital boxes, stripping away the cultural nuance that gave them life. Art historians warned that this exact problem was coming. They said AI could be brilliant at recognition, but blind to resonance. The danger wasn't that AI would mistranslate, it was that it would confidently mistranslate. And that's exactly what started happening. By 2025, several YouTube channels, Beyond Secrets, Aventrix, and The Hidden Tablet, began posting AI translations of the codices that read like doomsday scripts, warnings of skyfire, cycles ending, and human collapse. It made for great thumbnails, but experts weren't laughing. Because those apocalyptic lines likely came from misread cyclical renewal texts, meaning transformation, not destruction.
The Codex Maya of Mexico was written in 1100 CE by a single Mayan scribe.
It is the oldest book in all of the Americas.
So yes, AI can read 85% of the Maya language, but that last 15%, the contextual modifiers, is where the truth actually lives. Without them, every translation risks turning prophecy into panic. It's like translating, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" without knowing that in Elizabethan culture, that line was romantic, not meteorological. The AI breakthrough feels like humanity opening an ancient vault, but maybe we're reading our own reflection instead of the message left inside. Because if we can't grasp how the Maya saw time and meaning, what happens when we interpret their warnings through modern fear instead of ancient rhythm? To understand why that matters, we need to decode what the Maya were actually predicting. What did the AI really find hidden in those surviving pages? What the Codex actually warns: Venus, war, and cosmic battles. So, the AI didn't just decode ancient poetry or priestly rituals, it uncovered what might be the oldest celestial warning system in human history. According to the Dresden Codex, the Maya tracked one planet more obsessively than any other. Not Mars, not Jupiter, Venus. And they didn't see it as a planet. They saw it as a god with a temper, a wheel, the blazing deity of war, chaos, and divine order. When Venus rose bright in the sky, it wasn't a good omen. It meant war was coming. The Codex holds what's known as the Venus Tables, a 104-year astronomical almanac written with freakish precision. Imagine this. Over 6 centuries before Galileo, the Maya recorded Venus's 584-day cycle with an error margin of only 0.08 days compared to modern data. That's less than 2 hours off, without telescopes, satellites, or calculators. They tracked Venus through 4 phases: rising, vanishing, returning, and disappearing again, each one marking a different kind of omen. When Venus reappeared after disappearing into the sun's glare, it wasn't a celebration, it was a cosmic red alert. Here's where it gets chilling. The AI translation showed that the Maya tied these Venus cycles directly to terrestrial wars. When Venus aligned with solar eclipses, the scribes painted it as Chak-ek, the warrior star striking at the sun. They believed those alignments unleashed cosmic clashes mirrored on Earth, royal assassinations, city burnings, and full-scale conquests. The Codex even has glyphs, where a single Venus symbol appended to a king's name means total annihilation. Not just defeat, but erasure from history. Take April 562 CE. The mighty city of Tikal was crushed by the Snake dynasty of Kanul. Historians long thought it was just politics, but when the AI mapped the date onto Venus's position, something shocking appeared. The battle coincided perfectly with a phase where Venus re-emerged as the morning star, traditionally the war god's most aggressive aspect. The victory was so absolute that Tikal vanished from the records for more than a century. That's not a coincidence. That's astronomical warfare planning. These celestial playbooks didn't stop at prophecy. They became military calendars. Commanders waited for Venus to rise before launching attacks, believing the gods themselves would blind their enemies. Some even used eclipse tables from the same codex to fine-tune timing. The Maya could predict solar eclipses 3 days in advance over a 33-year span between 755 and 788 CE. What's mind-blowing is that all 77 global eclipses during that window fell within their predicted intervals. That's better than some modern models built on early computer systems. But here's the twist that almost no one talks about. Most of those eclipses didn't even touch Maya skies. The Codex wasn't predicting local events, it had built-in filters to weed out irrelevant cosmic noise. It was an ancient algorithm. It even contained recycling instructions for updating predictions over 1,400-year cycles. Essentially, a feedback loop for recalibrating time itself. The Maya weren't forecasting an apocalypse. They were managing cosmic data to decide when the heavens actually mattered to human action. AI translation, though, stripped out all that nuance. It saw destruction, where the Maya encoded calibration. It read end times, when the original message was closer to pay attention, but don't overreact. Without the cultural context of renewal, the cyclical nature of their timekeeping, and their collaborative priest-astronomer councils, the AI mistook instruction manuals for warnings. So the real message of the Dresden Codex isn't that humanity is doomed. It's that the universe runs on patterns. The Maya learned to read them, to know when cosmic battles could influence real wars, and when they were just celestial noise. It's not about predicting the end. It's about filtering chaos. And if their codex could tell the difference between a false omen and a real one, can artificial intelligence? Or has our own machine god already started confusing the signal for the noise? The translation trap. Why AI might be dangerously wrong. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The very technology the Maya may have foreseen around 2012, the so-called dawn of a new cycle.
It turns out that the Maya are talking about a start day of their calendar at the year 3114 BC, specifically August 13th. They say it's the last day of the third creation and the beginning of the fourth creation.
Is now the one misreading their warnings. AI, built to find order in chaos, might actually be repeating the Spanish colonizers' biggest mistake, forcing its own worldview onto something it was never designed to understand. Here's the irony. The Maya saw time not as a straight line from past to future, but as a living circle where every moment folds back on itself. Birth, death, renewal, they all coexist. AI, on the other hand, is wired for linear logic. It sees patterns like dominoes falling. Cause, then effect, then outcome. So when it scans a Mayan glyph, describing destruction followed by rebirth, it stops at destruction. To the algorithm, the apocalypse is the ending, not the reset. But the Maya didn't write stories the way we do. Their glyphs weren't neat subject-verb-object sentences. They were layered networks, images that could mean 3 or 4 things at once, depending on cosmic alignment, the speaker's rank, or even the color of ink used. Translating that with an AI model trained on English syntax is like teaching a machine to dream in 4K when it only understands spreadsheets. Modern epigraphers, the human experts, have been warning us for years. They say you can't separate these glyphs from their ritual, calendar, and community context. Yet AI doesn't know when to stop guessing. When it finds a gap in the text, it fills it with whatever fits its training data, usually Western cause and effect thinking. That's why you'll see viral videos from channels like Aventrix claiming the Codex predicts a calendar of war, sacrifice, and celestial vengeance. It sounds dramatic, sure, but it misses the half that matters. The renewal ceremonies, the recalibration cycles, and the parts about balance and recovery. And here's where it gets unsettling. That's exactly what the Spanish friars did in 1562 when they burnt the Maya books. They saw gods of maize and sky serpents and assumed devil worship. Today, AI sees those same glyphs and assumes a doomsday prophecy. 2 eras, same blind spot. Both strip away the collaboration, the nuance, and the cyclical meaning. Both replace understanding with projection. Even the translation accuracy that people brag about, 80 to 85%, sounds impressive until you realize that the missing 15% holds the modifiers that flip the meaning. That's like translating Shakespeare without knowing Elizabethan slang or stage direction. You'd get the words, but not the soul. So maybe the real threat isn't hidden in the Codex at all. We might be the ones who are arrogant enough to think that seeing the trends means we understand the truth. Because when we allow AI to interpret ancient wisdom without cultural supervision, we are not decoding history. We're colonizing it all over again, just with cleaner code. But what happens when you bring both worlds together? When will human cultural insight and AI computation actually collaborate instead of compete? What new truths might finally surface from the oldest digital code on Earth? Maybe that's the part we should be worried about. Not what the AI translated, but what it refused to. Because if the digital archaeologists are right, the missing fragments weren't errors at all. They were deliberate blanks, markers left by scribes who didn't want these symbols to ever be read by anyone unprepared. And yet, here we are, feeding them into neural networks built to decode everything. So, what happens when the next dataset isn't ancient, but human? When AI starts reading us like the Codex, could the next translation be our own story written without consent?